The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched so far that its ceiling disappeared into artificial clouds. 47 different species had representatives seated in the circular chamber, each on platforms that floated at different heights according to their power and influence. At the very top sat the Krillians, a species that had ruled the council for 3,000 years. At the bottom, in a small platform barely above the floor, sat Ambassador Hyejin of Earth. She had been summoned without warning. Her communications device had buzzed during breakfast, and within an hour she found herself standing in this massive chamber, surrounded by beings that could destroy her entire civilization with a single vote. Hyejin kept her face calm, but her heart was racing. She had served as Earth's ambassador for 5 years, and never once had she been called to an emergency session. Counselor Vexthar, the leader of the Krillians, stood from his throne at the top of the chamber. His body was covered in blue scales that shimmered under the lights, and his 4 eyes focused on Hyejin with obvious disdain. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the entire hall. "Human ambassador, your species has been part of this council for 15 years. In that time, you have expanded into 7 new star systems without proper authorization. You have developed technologies without sharing them with the council. You have acted as if the rules that govern all civilized species do not apply to you." Hyejin stood up slowly. "Counselor, every system we have settled was unclaimed according to council records. Every technology we have developed came from our own research. We have broken no laws." Vexthar's expression did not change. "You misunderstand your position, human. This council maintains peace across 10,000 systems. We do this through order, through structure, through hierarchy. Your rapid expansion threatens that order. Your independent attitude undermines that structure. Your refusal to accept your place in the hierarchy endangers everyone." Other council members began to murmur in agreement. Hyejin looked around the chamber and saw very few friendly faces. Most species here had been members for hundreds or thousands of years. They had all learned to accept the council's authority without question. "Therefore," Vexthar continued, "the council has made a decision. To ensure stability and security, humanity will transfer 40% of Earth's resources to council management. You will also accept a permanent council oversight force in your territory. This force will guide your expansion, monitor your technology development, and ensure you follow proper procedures." The words hit Hyejin like a physical blow. 40% of Earth's resources. Permanent oversight. She knew exactly what this meant. It meant the end of human independence. It meant Earth would become just another subject world, forever controlled by species that saw them as upstart children who needed to be managed. "This is not negotiable," Vexthar said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "However, the council is generous. We give you 72 hours to consult with your government and return with your acceptance." "You may speak." Hyejin took a deep breath. Every instinct told her to be diplomatic, to buy time, to make promises. But she also knew that some moments required absolute honesty. "Counselor, I must inform my government of these terms immediately. This decision will affect every human being alive. I will return in 72 hours with our response." Vexthar seemed pleased. "Good. I expect you will see the wisdom of cooperation. Every species that has sat where you sit now eventually understands. The council's authority is absolute. Fighting it only brings suffering. Accepting it brings prosperity." The session ended and Hyejin left the chamber as quickly as diplomatic protocol allowed. Her ship, a small diplomatic vessel, was docked nearby. As soon as she was aboard, she sent an encrypted message to Earth. Code read, "Emergency." Then she collapsed into her chair and let herself shake for just a moment. 3 systems away, Captain Daehyun received the alert on his command screen. He was aboard the Resilience, Earth's largest diplomatic and military vessel. It had been stationed near the Council's neutral zone for exactly this kind of emergency. Daehyun was 40 years old, with gray starting to show in his hair. He had fought in the colony wars against pirates and had negotiated with 6 different alien species. He knew when trouble was coming. "All officers to the bridge," he ordered. Within minutes, his senior staff had assembled. Daehyun displayed the message from Ambassador Hyejin on the main screen. It contained only basic details, but it was enough. "They are demanding 40% of our resources and permanent oversight," Daehyun read aloud. "The ambassador has 72 hours to respond." His first officer, a woman named Yunji, spoke up immediately. "That is insane. 40% would cripple our economy. Oversight would end our independence. Yes, Daehyun said quietly. That is the point. They want to control us. Another officer, Lieutenant Sung-ho, looked confused. But why? We have followed every council law. We have been peaceful. Daehyun walked to the viewing window, looking out at the stars. Because we are different. Most species join the council after they have been discovered by older civilizations. They join from a position of weakness. We joined after we discovered them. We came to the council as equals, and they have never forgiven us for that. They see our independence as a threat. What do? Yoonji asked. We wait for orders from Earth, Daehyun said. But we also prepare. Bring the fleet to ready status. Make sure every ship can jump to combat mode within 60 seconds. Do not broadcast this order. Use secure channels only. As his crew moved to follow orders, Daehyun received another message. This one came from Admiral Jiwon, the supreme commander of all Earth's military forces. It was brief. Protocol Defiance is authorized. Prepare for any outcome, Daehyun understood. Protocol Defiance was Earth's contingency plan for exactly this scenario. It assumed the Council would eventually demand humanity's submission. It assumed humanity would refuse. And it assumed war would follow. On Earth, President Minho was woken at 3 in the morning by urgent calls from his security team. By the time he reached the Situation Room, half of Earth's government was already there. Screens on every wall showed data, fleet positions, and the faces of colony governors from 7 different star systems. Ambassador Hyejin appeared on the main screen, her face tired but determined. She explained the Council's demands in detail, leaving nothing out. When she finished, the room was silent. President Minho stood up. He was a small man with kind eyes, but everyone in the room knew he had a spine of steel. 72 hours. They give us 72 hours to decide if we will be free or slaves. We should negotiate, one advisor said. Maybe we can reduce the percentage. Maybe we can limit the oversight. No, said General Taejun from his seat near the back. You do not negotiate with bullies. You stand up to them or you kneel forever. The debate was about to begin. Earth had 72 hours to make the most important decision in human history. The emergency session of Earth's United Assembly took place in Geneva, inside a building that had witnessed hundreds of years of human diplomacy. Representatives from every nation and colony gathered in person or through holographic projection. The chamber was packed and everyone knew what was at stake. Outside the building, thousands of people had gathered, waiting for news. President Minho stood at the central podium. He had not slept since receiving Ambassador Hyejin's message 20 hours ago. His speech was broadcast to every human settlement in the solar system and beyond. My fellow humans, he began, his voice steady. The Galactic Council has given us an ultimatum. They demand that we surrender 40% of our resources and accept permanent military oversight of our territory. They have given us 72 hours to comply. The chamber erupted in angry shouts. Minho raised his hand for silence. I know your feelings. I share them. But we must discuss this carefully. The Council has existed for thousands of years. They control hundreds of worlds and command fleets that could destroy us. This is not a decision we can make from anger alone. The debate began immediately. Some representatives argued for acceptance. A man from the Mars colony stood up and spoke with fear in his voice. We are one species against 47. We have been in space for less than a century. They have been there for millennia. If we fight, we will lose everything. A woman from Europa colony responded. If we surrender, we lose everything anyway. Just more slowly. Does anyone here believe the Council will stop at 40%? Does anyone think their oversight will ever end? Dr. Sun-hee, Earth's chief scientific advisor, waited for her turn to speak. She was 60 years old and had spent her entire life studying physics and technology. When the room quieted, she activated a holographic display that showed complex data. I have information that changes everything, she said. For the past 10 years, Council representatives have been accessing our research databases. They claimed it was for compatibility purposes. We allowed it because we wanted to be good members. But I have been analyzing what they looked at. They were not checking compatibility. They were stealing our research. The room went silent. Sun-hee continued. More importantly, they were afraid of our research. Our quantum drive technology is 50 years ahead of the Council's best systems. Our artificial intelligence is more advanced. Our medical treatments cure diseases they consider incurable. They are not demanding oversight because we are dangerous. They are demanding it because we are advancing too fast and it scares them. President Minho leaned forward. How fast are we advancing, Doctor? Son, he pulled up more data. At our current rate, we will match the Council's total technological level in 30 years. In 50 years, we will surpass them. They know this. That is why they are acting now. Another representative, an older man named Huang, stood up. That may be true, but in 30 years, we will also be stronger. Why not accept their terms now? Buy ourselves time and resist later when we are more powerful. General Taejun, who had been sitting quietly, finally spoke. He was a large man with scars on his face from the colony wars. Because that is not how subjugation works. I have studied every species that joined the Council in the last 500 years. Every single one accepted temporary oversight. Not one of them ever got free. The Council does not just steal resources. They steal potential. They slow down research. They limit expansion. They control education. Once you accept the chains, they make sure you never grow strong enough to break them. The room filled with worried whispers. President Minho called for order again. We have heard arguments for both sides. But before we vote, I want everyone to understand what we are really choosing. This is not about resources or territory. This is about who we are as a species. He walked away from the podium, moving among the representatives as he spoke. Our ancestors lived in caves. They faced ice ages that should have killed them. They survived plagues that wiped out half their populations. They fought wars that nearly destroyed the entire planet. And through all of it, they never stopped moving forward. They never accepted permanent defeat. They never bowed to tyranny for the promise of safety. Minho's voice grew stronger. We did not claw our way from caves to stars just to kneel before beings who think they are better than us. We did not survive everything Earth threw at us just to surrender to aliens who are afraid of our potential. Yes, they are stronger. Yes, they have more ships. But strength is not just about numbers. It is about will. It is about courage. It is about being willing to fight for what matters, even when the odds are against you. The chamber was completely silent now. Every eye was on the president. If we accept these terms, we tell our children that freedom only matters when it is convenient. We tell them that principles can be abandoned when someone stronger makes demands. We tell them to be afraid of their own greatness. I will not do that. I will not sell our future for the illusion of peace today. He returned to the podium. But this is not my decision alone. Every human being should have a voice in this. Therefore, I am calling for a global vote. Every person over the age of 16 on Earth and every colony will be allowed to vote. We have 48 hours remaining before the deadline. The voting will begin immediately and close 12 hours before we must give our answer. Whatever humanity decides, we will stand together. The voting system was activated within an hour. The question was simple: accept the Council's terms or reject them. There was no middle option. No negotiation. Just yes or no. On Mars, a young woman named June voted from her apartment in the capital city. She was an engineer who worked on the orbital defense platforms. She voted to reject the terms. My parents came to Mars to build something new, she told her friends. I will not watch it be taken away. On Earth, an old man in Seoul voted to accept. He had lived through wars and remembered the suffering. I am afraid, he admitted to his grandson, but perhaps fear is not enough reason to surrender. On the colony ship Horizon, which was halfway to a new star system, every crew member voted. They were 3 years from their destination. They voted knowing that their answer might mean they would arrive at a star system in the middle of a war. They voted to reject anyway. The votes came in by the millions, then billions. President Minho watched the numbers climb on screens in the Situation Room. Admiral Jiwon stood beside him. You know what will happen if we reject, the Admiral said quietly. Yes, Minho replied. They will attack us. We might not win, probably not. But we will fight. And maybe that is enough. With 2 hours left before voting closed, the numbers were clear. 78% of humanity voted to reject the Council's terms. It was not even close. From the oldest colonies to the newest settlements, from Earth's largest cities to its smallest villages, humanity had spoken. President Minho sent a secure message to Ambassador Hyejin. It contained only one word: no. He also sent a message to Admiral Jiwon. Prepare the fleet. Bring every ship online. Recall all personnel to duty stations. If the Council wants Earth, they will have to take it from us. Finally, he sent a message to Dr. Sunhee. Release all classified technology to the fleet. Everything we have been holding back. If we're going to fight, we fight with everything we have. Around Earth, the defense platforms powered up. Ships that had been in dock began emergency departures. Civilian volunteers started flooding recruitment centers. Factories switched to military production. The entire planet was preparing for war. Ambassador Hyejin received the president's message aboard her ship. She read the single word and smiled. She had hoped for this answer. She had voted for it herself. Now she had to deliver it to the council. She knew they would be furious. She knew they would threaten her. She did not care. She was about to tell the most powerful beings in the galaxy that humanity would not bow. Part of her was terrified, but most of her felt proud. Ambassador Hyejin walked through the corridors of the council station with her head held high. Her escort, 2 large security guards from a species she did not recognize, stayed close but said nothing. They led her toward the Great Hall where 47 species waited for Earth's answer. She knew what they expected. Every species before humanity had negotiated. They had argued for better terms, complained about the percentages, requested modifications. But in the end, they all accepted. That was how the council worked. That was how it had always worked. The massive doors opened and Hyejin entered the chamber. It looked exactly as it had 3 days ago, except now every seat was filled. Representatives from species across the galaxy had come to witness this moment. Some looked curious. Most looked bored. They had seen this drama play out dozens of times before. A young species would protest, would make speeches about freedom and independence, and then would accept reality. Counselor Vexthar sat on his high throne, his blue scales shimmering under the lights. He gestured for Hyejin to approach the central platform. Ambassador from Earth, your time has expired. What is your government's response to the council's generous terms? Hyejin reached the platform and stood in the circle of light at its center. She looked up at Vexithar, then slowly turned to face the entire chamber. She wanted every representative to see her face when she spoke. Before I give Earth's answer, she began, her voice clear and strong. I want to make sure I understand the council's offer. You demand 40% of our resources. You demand permanent military oversight. You claim this is for security and stability. Is that correct? Vexithar nodded, clearly pleased that she was engaging with the terms. That is correct. Of course, we are reasonable beings. If your government has concerns about specific details, we can discuss minor adjustments. Perhaps 38% of resources instead of 40. Perhaps oversight reviews every decade instead of permanent stations. The council understands that negotiation is part of diplomacy. Other council members nodded in agreement. This was the game they always played. Offer harsh terms, then make small concessions so the victim felt like they won something. Hyejin had studied recordings of previous negotiations. She knew exactly how this was supposed to go. I see, Hyejin said quietly. And if we refuse? The chamber went silent. Several representatives sat up straighter in their seats. Vexthar's expression changed from pleased to annoyed. Ambassador, I think you misunderstand. Refusal is not an option. This is the decision of the council. You do not refuse the council. But hypothetically, Hyejin pressed, if we did refuse, what would happen? Vexthar's 4 eyes narrowed. Then you would face the consequences of your foolishness. Economic sanctions, trade blockades, and if necessary, military action to ensure compliance. But no species has been that stupid in 300 years. Every civilization eventually sees reason. Hyejin nodded slowly. Thank you for that clarification. Now I will deliver Earth's response. She pulled out a small datapad and held it up. President Minho, on behalf of all humanity, has authorized me to give you this message. The chamber leaned forward. Even the board representatives were now paying attention. Hyejin took a deep breath and spoke clearly. Humanity's answer is no. The silence that followed was absolute. For 5 full seconds, nobody moved or spoke. Then chaos erupted. Representatives began shouting questions. Some were demanding clarification. Others were laughing, assuming this was some kind of human joke they did not understand. Vexthar raised his hand and the chamber fell silent again. His voice was cold and sharp. Ambassador, I will assume you misspoke. Perhaps there was a translation error. Please repeat your government's response. There was no error, Hyejin replied. Earth's answer is no. We will not surrender our resources. We will not accept oversight. We will not negotiate terms of our own subjugation. We reject your demands completely. Another council member, a being covered in gray fur, spoke up. This is madness. You are one species, one world. You have no allies, no power, no chance of survival if you defy us. Why would you choose destruction over cooperation? Hijin turned to face the speaker. Because cooperation requires mutual respect. What you offer is not cooperation. It is slavery with better words. And humanity did not survive for 200,000 years by accepting slavery. Vexthar stood from his throne, his massive form towering over the chamber. You dare compare the Council's guidance to slavery? We maintain peace across 10,000 worlds. We prevent wars. We ensure stability.
Ungrateful primitives like you do not understand what chaos would exist without us?
Perhaps, Yijin said calmly. Or perhaps the only chaos comes from trying to control species that do not wish to be controlled. You speak of peace, Counselor, but I have studied your history. Every species that accepted your oversight stopped advancing. Their technology stagnated. Their culture stagnated. They became frozen in time, forever serving the Council's interests instead of their own. You do not maintain peace. You maintain control. The chamber exploded with angry shouts. Several representatives were demanding that Hyejin be removed. Others were calling for immediate sanctions against Earth. Vexthar's face had turned a darker shade of blue, a sign of rage in his species. You have made a grave mistake. Human, Vexthar said, his voice shaking with fury. The Council has been generous. We have been patient with your species because you are young and ignorant. But there are limits to our patience. I will give you one more chance. Return to your government. Tell them what I am about to say. If Earth does not accept our terms within 72 hours, the Grand Fleet will be dispatched to your system. Every colony will be occupied. Every ship will be impounded. Every human will learn what it means to defy the Council. Do you understand? Hyejin felt fear grip her heart, but she kept her face steady. I understand perfectly, Counselor. You are threatening to attack us because we refuse to be controlled. You are proving my point. This session is over, Vexthar declared. Guards, escort the ambassador to her ship and send a message to every Council member species. We are mobilizing the Grand Fleet. Humanity will serve as a lesson to any other species that might consider defiance. As the guards moved to escort her out, Hyejin turned one more time to face the chamber. She knew this might be her last chance to speak to the galactic community. I want every species here to remember this moment. Remember that Earth was willing to die rather than surrender its freedom. Remember that one small species stood up to the entire Council, because some things are worth fighting for. And when you are alone at night, ask yourselves this question. If we can say no, why can't you? The guards pulled her toward the exit, but Hyejin could see that her words had an effect. Some representatives looked uncomfortable. Others looked thoughtful. A few looked angry, but not at Earth. They looked angry at the Council. As she was led through the corridors back to her ship, one of the guards spoke quietly. That was very brave, Ambassador. Also very stupid, but brave. Thank you, Hyejin replied. The Grand Fleet has never lost a battle, the guard continued. They will destroy your world. Maybe, Hyejin said. But we will make them work for it. She boarded her ship and immediately sent a message to Earth. The response had been delivered. War was now certain. As her ship left the Council station, Hyejin looked back at the massive structure floating in space. It looked powerful and eternal, but she knew that nothing was truly eternal. Everything could be challenged. Everything could change. Humanity was about to try. Across the galaxy, news of the confrontation spread rapidly. Most species heard the story with shock. The humans had refused. The crazy, primitive humans had actually refused the Council. Some thought it was inspiring. Most thought it was suicide. On a distant mining colony, a young worker from the Quelon species heard the news and whispered to himself, "They said no." Someone finally said no. In the Council chambers, Vexthar issued orders to mobilize the Grand Fleet. It was time to remind the galaxy why nobody refused the Council. But as he gave his orders, he felt something he had not felt in decades. He felt worried, because if humanity could refuse, others might too. And if the system of control started to crack, the entire Council might crumble. News of humanity's rejection spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within hours, every major civilization knew what had happened. The humans had said no. The young species with barely 100 years in space had refused the Galactic Council's demands. Most species considered it insanity. A few considered it inspiring. All of them watched to see what would happen next. On Earth, President Minho addressed the planet from the United Assembly Building. Billions watched as he spoke calmly about what was coming. The Council has threatened to send their grand fleet to force our compliance. They believe we will surrender when we see their power. They are wrong. We will defend our world and our freedom with everything we have. Every human, every colony, every ship will stand together. We are not afraid. But many humans were afraid. In the cities, people stocked up on supplies. Parents held their children tighter. The elderly remembered the wars of the past and worried about the wars of the future. Yet beneath the fear was something else, something that had always defined humanity. It was stubbornness. It was the refusal to accept defeat before the battle had even begun. Admiral Jiwan stood on the bridge of the command station above Earth, looking at tactical displays that showed the entire solar system. Every defensive platform was online. Every ship was ready. The fleet was not large by Council standards, but it was all they had. She had fought in smaller battles before, skirmishes with pirates and raiders. This would be different. This would be total war against an enemy that had never known defeat. Her second-in-command, Commander Kyungsoo, approached with a datapad. Admiral, we have confirmation. The Council's Grand Fleet has left their staging area. They will reach the outer edge of our system in approximately 48 hours. Jiwan nodded. How many ships? Over 300 capital ships. Twice that number in support vessels. It is the largest force they have assembled in 2 centuries. The numbers were staggering. Earth's entire fleet numbered less than 80 ships. The math was simple and brutal. They were going to lose. But losing did not mean surrendering. Jiwan had studied military history her entire life. She knew that sometimes the losing side changed the world anyway. Send orders to all fleet captains, Jiwan said. We will not engage them in open battle. We will make them fight for every meter of space. We will use the asteroid belt as cover. We will strike from unexpected angles. We will make them pay for every victory. Far from Earth, on a small colony moon called Haven, a civilian freighter captain named Young-soo was preparing his ship for departure. Haven was home to 30,000 humans, mostly miners and their families. When news of the Council's threat reached them, the colonial governor had ordered an evacuation. Most civilians would leave on passenger ships, but cargo needed to be moved too, and Young-soo's ship was one of the largest freighters in the colony. His crew was loading the last containers when his first mate, a young woman named Hana, approached him. Captain, we have received a broadcast from Admiral Jiwan. She is asking for civilian volunteers to assist the fleet. They need cargo ships to deliver supplies and ammunition during the battle. Young-soo looked at his ship. It was old and slow, built for carrying goods, not fighting wars. If we volunteer, we will be flying into a war zone. Yes, Hana agreed. But if we evacuate, we will be leaving Earth to fight alone. Young-soo thought about his 2 sons, both serving in the military. He thought about his parents living in Busan. He thought about every human being who had ever shown him kindness. Then he made his decision. Send a message to the Admiral. The freighter Prosperity and her crew volunteer for service. Within hours, thousands of civilian ships joined the cause. Freighters, mining ships, even luxury yachts. They were not warships, but they could carry supplies, perform rescues, and free up military vessels for combat. The fleet was small, but it was determined. On orbital defense platform Sentinel-7, Engineer June was working her 3rd consecutive shift without sleep. She was implementing Dr. Sunhee's new defensive protocols, upgrades that had been classified until now. The technology was revolutionary, based on quantum field manipulation that could deflect energy weapons and confuse targeting systems. It had never been tested in real combat. Soon they would find out if it worked. Her team worked frantically, installing new systems and calibrating sensors. They were exhausted but focused. June had grown up on Mars, had spent her entire life building things, creating things. Now she would defend what her generation had built. She would not let the Council take it without a fight. Across the solar system, humanity prepared for war, but they were not the only ones paying attention. On dozens of Council member worlds, beings watched the human preparations with fascination. For centuries, they had lived under Council control, had accepted it as the natural order of things. Now someone was resisting, and it made them think dangerous thoughts. Counselor Thren of the Quellan Syndicate watched the preparations from his private chambers. His species had joined the Council 200 years ago, after their homeworld was threatened with destruction. They had accepted oversight, had surrendered their autonomy, had become obedient subjects. Thren had always justified it as necessary for survival, but watching the humans prepare to fight impossible odds made him question everything. He sent a secure message to Ambassador Hyejin. It was brief and encrypted. "You are not alone. Some of us remember what freedom felt like. If you survive the initial attack, others may find courage to join you. Fight well." Hyejin received the message as her ship approached Earth. She did not know if she could trust it, but it gave her hope. Maybe humanity's resistance would inspire others. Maybe their sacrifice would mean something beyond their own survival. Captain Daehyun stood on the bridge of the Resilience, watching his crew prepare for battle. He had been in combat before, but never anything like this. His ship was one of Earth's newest and fastest, equipped with experimental weapons that Dr. Sunhee's team had developed. They had been designed for defense against pirates and raiders. Now they would face the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. His tactical officer, Lieutenant Minjae, looked up from his console. "Captain, we are receiving the Admiral's battle plan. She wants the Resilience to lead the first strike force. We will engage the enemy at maximum range, hit them hard, then retreat before they can respond." Daehyun smiled grimly. "Hit-and-run tactics. We are going to annoy them to death." "Something like that, sir." The crew laughed, but the humor was nervous. They all knew what they were facing. The Grand Fleet had crushed rebellions, destroyed pirate armadas, and maintained council authority for 1,000 years. They did not lose battles. They did not show mercy. They did not negotiate once combat began. But humans had one advantage the council did not expect. They had nothing to lose. When you are already facing destruction, you can take risks that comfortable powers would never consider. You can be creative, unpredictable, and absolutely ruthless. Admiral Jiwan sent a final message to all human forces, military and civilian. "In a few hours, the Council's fleet will arrive. They expect us to surrender when we see their numbers. They expect us to beg for mercy. They expect us to break, but we are human. We do not break. We bend, we adapt, and we survive. Our ancestors conquered a planet that tried to kill them every day. We conquered space despite having no natural advantages for it. We have overcome every obstacle our species has ever faced. This is just one more. Fight with courage. Fight with intelligence. Fight with everything you have. And know that whatever happens, you are making history. You are showing the galaxy that freedom matters more than survival. Let's make them remember us." The Grand Fleet emerged from quantum space at the edge of the solar system exactly on schedule. 300 massive warships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. They moved in perfect formation, a display of overwhelming power designed to terrify any opponent into immediate surrender. On the Council flagship, Fleet Commander Zix reviewed tactical data. The human defenses looked pathetic. A few dozen ships, some primitive orbital platforms, and what appeared to be civilian vessels pretending to be military. This would not be a battle. It would be an execution. He sent a simple message toward Earth. "Surrender now and your species will be spared. Resist and you will be destroyed." Admiral Jiwan received the message on her command screen. She looked at it for exactly 1 second, then deleted it. "All ships, weapons free. Let's show them what humans can do." The battle began at the edge of the solar system, where the Council's Grand Fleet emerged from quantum space like an unstoppable wave. Fleet Commander Zix expected immediate surrender. Instead, he received weapons fire. Captain Daehyun's ship, the Resilience, led the first strike. His fleet of 12 ships had been hiding behind asteroids, their signatures masked by the natural radiation of space. They struck fast and hard, targeting the Council fleet's sensor arrays and communication hubs. The experimental weapons that Dr. Sunhee had developed proved devastatingly effective. Quantum disruption torpedoes created cascading failures in the Council ship's shields. Energy weapons that could phase through standard defenses tore into hulls that had been considered invincible. The attack lasted exactly 90 seconds. Then Daehyun's fleet scattered, disappearing into the asteroid belt before the Council forces could respond. They had destroyed 3 ships and damaged 7 more. It was not a major victory, but it sent a message. Humans would not fight fair. Zix watched the tactical display with surprise. The attack had been coordinated and precise. These primitives had actually hurt his fleet. He felt anger rising but pushed it down. Anger made you predictable, and he was a professional. All ships pursue the human forces. Destroy them. But the asteroid belt was a maze of rocks and dust that interfered with the Council's sensors. The human ships knew every hiding spot, every shadow. They struck again and again, always from unexpected angles, always retreating before the Council could bring their superior firepower to bear. It was guerrilla warfare in space, and it was working. Admiral Jiwan watched the battle from her command center, studying patterns and looking for weaknesses. The Council fleet was powerful but predictable. They fought with overwhelming force, expecting enemies to meet them head-on. Humans refused to play that game. Instead, they bled the enemy slowly, one cut at a time. "Send orders to Captain Youngsu's civilian fleet," Jiwan commanded. "Begin supply runs to our forward positions. Keep the military ships armed and ready." Youngsu received his orders aboard the freighter Prosperity. His ship and hundreds like it began moving through the battle zone, delivering ammunition and supplies while evacuating damaged ships' crews. The Council forces largely ignored the civilian vessels, considering them beneath notice. It was a mistake. The civilian fleet kept the human military at peak efficiency while tying up Council resources that could have been used elsewhere. On orbital platform Sentinel-7, Engineer June activated the quantum defense grid for the first time. The technology created fluctuating energy fields that made targeting impossible. Council weapons fired at where the platforms had been, not where they were. Return fire from the platform struck with perfect accuracy. 3 Council cruisers exploded in the span of minutes, their captains unable to understand why their weapons could not hit their targets. The battle raged for 12 hours. The Council pushed forward, expecting to overwhelm Earth's defenses through sheer numbers. But every advance cost them ships. Every victory came with heavy casualties. The humans fought with a desperation and creativity that the Council had not encountered in centuries. Commander Kyung-soo reported to Admiral Jiwan with updates. "We have lost 18 ships. Enemy losses are at 47 ships destroyed, 92 damaged. Their fleet is advancing but slower than expected." Jiwan nodded. The numbers were still against them, but the ratio was better than anyone had predicted. "Order all forces to fall back to Mars orbit. We will make our stand there." The retreat was orderly and controlled. Human ships leapfrogged backward, each group covering the others as they withdrew. The Council fleet followed, but cautiously now. They had expected an easy victory. Instead, they had suffered more losses in 12 hours than in the past 10 years combined. On the Council flagship, Fleet Commander Zix called an emergency meeting with his captains. "Explain to me how a primitive species with inferior numbers is costing us this many ships." One captain, a veteran of dozens of campaigns, spoke carefully. "They are not fighting the way we expected. They refuse direct engagement. They use terrain to their advantage. They strike our weakest points and retreat before we can respond. And their technology is more advanced than our intelligence suggested." Zix slammed his hand on the table. "Then adapt. Use our advantages. We have numbers. We have firepower. We have experience. Crush them." But adapting was easier said than done. The Council had fought the same way for centuries because it always worked. Overwhelming force against weaker enemies. The problem was that humans did not fight like weaker enemies were supposed to fight. They did not stand and die heroically. They hit, ran, hit, and hit again. It was frustrating and effective. The battle continued for another 24 hours. At Mars orbit, the human defense was fierce. The orbital platforms combined with the fleet to create a killing zone that destroyed every Council ship that entered. But the Council kept pushing, kept sacrificing ships to wear down the human defenses. Slowly, inevitably, the tide began to turn. Captain Daehyun's ship took heavy damage in the fighting around Mars. Half his crew was dead or injured. His shields were failing. His weapons were nearly depleted. He sent a final message to Admiral Jiwan. "We have given everything we have. If this is the end, we made them pay for it." But it was not the end. Something unexpected happened. 3 Council ships suddenly changed course, moving away from the battle. Then 5 more. Then a dozen. Zix watched in confusion as his own fleet began to fragment. "What are those ships doing?" "I gave no order to retreat." The answer came through an emergency transmission. It was Counselor Thren speaking from his homeworld. "Commander Zix, this is a direct order from the Quellan Syndicate. Our ships are withdrawing from the battle. We will no longer participate in this unjust war." Zix stared at the screen in shock. You are abandoning the council in the middle of a battle? This is treason. Thren's expression was calm. No, this is freedom. The humans showed us that we do not have to obey. We can choose our own path. As of now, the Quellan Syndicate is withdrawing from the Galactic Council. We will stand with Earth. The effect was immediate. With Kellan ships withdrawing, the Council fleet's formation began to collapse. More importantly, other species started questioning their orders. If the Quellan could leave, why couldn't they? The unity that had made the Council invincible was cracking. Admiral Jiwan saw the opportunity and seized it. All ships full offensive. Hit them now while they are confused. The human fleet surged forward with renewed energy. Damaged ships that had been retreating turned and rejoined the battle. Civilian vessels began ramming maneuvers against Council supply lines. Orbital platforms concentrated fire on the Council flagship. Six realized his situation was deteriorating rapidly. His fleet was larger, but it was divided and confused. The humans were smaller but united and desperate. And now he was fighting on two fronts as Quellan ships actively defended human positions. He had never lost a battle in his career. He was about to lose his first. All ships retreat to the outer system, he ordered. We will regroup and request reinforcements. The order to retreat sent shockwaves through the Council fleet. They had never retreated before. They did not know how. The withdrawal was chaotic and costly. Human forces harassed the fleeing ships, destroying stragglers and capturing damaged vessels. By the time the Council fleet reached the edge of the solar system, they had lost over 100 ships. The Grand Fleet, undefeated for 1,000 years, had been driven back by a species they considered primitive. On Earth, people watched the battle's conclusion on screens in cities and homes across the planet. When the Council fleet jumped away, retreating from the system, the celebrations began. Humans danced in the streets, cried with relief, and hugged strangers. They had won. Against impossible odds, they had defended their freedom. President Minho addressed the planet once more, his voice tired but proud. Today, humanity proved that courage matters more than numbers. We proved that freedom is worth fighting for. And we proved that we will never bow to tyranny. The Council thought we were weak. They were wrong. But Minho knew the war was not over. The Council would return eventually, stronger and more determined. However, something had changed. Quellan had broken free. Other species would follow. The galaxy would never be the same. Ambassador Hyejin received a message from Counselor Thren. My people are free because yours showed us it was possible. We are with you now. Together we will build a better galaxy. Within weeks, 3 more species withdrew from the Council. Within months, it was 7. The rigid hierarchy that had controlled the galaxy for millennia was crumbling. Some Council members tried to hold it together through force. Others accepted that change was inevitable. A year after the battle, Ambassador Hyejin stood before a very different Galactic Council. Half the original members had left. New alliances had formed. The structure of galactic power had fundamentally changed. She addressed them with the same confidence she had shown when rejecting their ultimatum. We did not reject negotiation because we wanted war. We rejected subjugation because we value freedom. The galaxy does not need rulers and subjects. It needs partners, equals, species that respect each other's sovereignty while working together for common goals. That is what we offer. That is what we will build. Counselor Vexthar, whose power had been greatly diminished, spoke bitterly. You have destroyed thousands of years of order and stability. Hyejin met his gaze. No, we destroyed thousands of years of control and oppression. What we build next will be better. On Earth, life slowly returned to normal. Cities were rebuilt. The fleet was repaired and expanded. New colonies were established. But humans never forgot what they had learned. Freedom was not guaranteed. It had to be defended. And sometimes the smallest and weakest could change the galaxy if they were brave enough to try. Captain Daehyun, promoted to admiral after the battle, stood on the rebuilt Resilience and looked at the stars. Somewhere out there, species were fighting for their own freedom, inspired by humanity's example. He smiled. Humans had always been good at inspiring others to dream bigger and reach higher. Dr. Sunhee continued her research, now sharing it freely with allied species. Technology that had been classified became common knowledge. Advancement that would have taken centuries happened in years. The galaxy was changing, growing, evolving, and it was beautiful. On a distant world that had been under council control for 500 years, a young child watched a recording of Ambassador Heejin's speech. The child's parents stood beside them. Remember this day. Remember that someone said no. Remember that change is possible. Maybe one day we will be free too. The galaxy was vast and ancient, but it was not unchanging. One species, barely a century in space, had proven that courage could overcome power, that will could defeat numbers, that freedom was worth any cost. Humanity had stumbled into the stars as the youngest and weakest. They had become the catalyst for galactic revolution, and they were just getting started.